Okay, so I'm sat with Oliver. There's two Olivers here. Oliver interviewing Oliver about his new book. So hello, Oliver.
How you doing, Oliver? Good to be here.
Good.
To finally get down to this audio that we've been planning on doing for quite some time.
That's it. Well, I mean, I've heard about the book sort of for a relatively kind of like long amount of time now. But I suppose, I mean, I haven't kind of like read it yet. So it's kind of like completely new to me. So it'd be kind of just good to hear, well, just kind of, you know, the author's thoughts on it. I'll be more specific though, obviously.
Yeah.
So firstly, what's the title of the book and why was it called that? And what were your first drives to wanting to write and finish the book?
Well, the title of the book is Anxiety, How to Deal with Your Anxiety. And this is a book that I was inspired to write at the end of last year. So in December when I was in Cyprus.
Right, okay.
And before then, I was initially inspired to write two articles on anxiety. I'd already written articles about anxiety before, but I was just inspired at that point to write two. And after I did those, I thought, well, I've got something else to offer here. I can put something together.
Cool.
That can make a difference. So I thought, okay, let's sit down and let's get it done. So it didn't take me long to complete the book. And when I got home to England, I just added a few more touches and there's something else I came across. So I thought that had to be in the book.
Wonderful.
And then the cover took about 4 or 5 days, maybe a bit longer.
It's a great cover,
just pretty,
I've got to say. It's a great cover.
Cheers,
great cover.
It all fell into place.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So talk about a little bit more about the cover. So who did the cover? If we're allowed to kind of like mention kind of who did the cover and sort of has this individual done covers for kind of previous books, and what do you like about kind of the artwork and things like that?
Well, when it came to the cover, I was looking for an image that was quite peaceful. I didn't want something that was basically going to make people feel unsettled just looking at the cover.
That's important.
I mean, obviously the word anxiety has got to be on there, and that of course can make someone feel a bit unsettled if they're in a bad way, but there was no way that I couldn't have that on there.
Well, of course,
You know, twice of course, because it's the main title and the subtitle, but with that aside, I chose an image that I thought was relaxing. It's like of a blossom, and I thought that was perfect, you know, because it really sets the tone, and it's relaxing and it's peaceful. And after that, the guy that I usually work with has basically disappeared. It's gone AWOL, don't know where he's gone.
Okay.
So I found someone else, and it was a reasonable price, a very good communication with them, and they're happy to do all the edits because I'm not a perfectionist. However, when it comes down to a cover and something like this, it's got to be done right. So if there is something, I'd rather just have it changed to see how it looks, and I can change it back than just, that will do. Because I think, that will not do, and it's got to be done properly. So
Well, we talked about this the other day because you kind of said that perhaps in your kind of earlier stages when you were kind of like starting to write. We'll talk about a little bit about kind of the history of you writing, because you've kind of written a lot at the moment and things like that. So when did the emphasis sort of like come, don't want to labour the point about talking about the cover, but obviously in regards to kind of maybe where it wasn't so important to you before, and obviously sort of like now you seem to kind of like made quite a significant effort with the cover. So perhaps what was, where were you at kind of before that kind of perhaps kind of contrasted to kind of where you may be at now in regards to the visual representation of the book?
I think in the beginning, I would just put a book together and then think, right, let's just get a cover done. I wasn't too concerned. I wanted it to look good, but I suppose I hadn't really thought too much about other covers and how they looked, and I didn't get too caught up in that process. And then as time has gone, I thought, well, the inside is good, and so the outside has got to be as good as the inside. And
Absolutely,
I suppose as I've valued myself more, I've thought it deserves something that looks better, because this is obviously coming from me, and of course this whole thing, we judge books by their covers, usually. And so the cover has got to look right, it's got to be smart. I think as well in the beginning, although I said that I didn't get too caught up in the beginning, I did think the covers were good.
Yeah.
And then what happened was someone else did a cover, so I think I might have worked with someone else, and they did this new cover.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just blew away everything, every other cover I did. So although at the time each cover I thought was good, and there is some of them I think still look quite good.
Mm-hmm.
But then as time went on and seeing this new one, it just made me think, wow, this new one is brilliant.
Yeah.
And it makes the others look quite, well, not as good in comparison.
Subpar.
So it's just that contrast, I think, really, of just the growth I've had and getting more involved in the process and my own growth in general, I think, has just led to me just going down the route where I think, right, this has got to be at the same level as the kind of books hitting number ones and that people know about.
Of course, yeah. So for people that kind of maybe, obviously sort of maybe coming to your work for the first time or coming to the interview and the audio and perhaps don't know much about you or your background, obviously you could talk about it all day. Obviously your personal growth from sort of becoming sort of, setting forth in this kind of like personal, I suppose, healing journey. And then obviously deciding to maybe reach out and write about it, its implications about why or why not you may have sort of like thought about it, maybe as a career or sort of like just to reach out to people. I mean, these things are always, or rarely should I say, are kind of ever simple. So if you give us a rough idea of sort of maybe when you may have kind of started out on this kind of like journey, and when did you start writing, and perhaps what got you to the point of maybe writing this most recent book?
So it all started for me in, I took the first step on the path in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote my first article at the end of 2010.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And before then I had a journal for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already writing, not publicly, of course, for around 2 years. And then it led to me writing my first article. And from there, I wrote, a few hundred more, and then into the thousands now. And during that time, I started to put books together. And in 2018, I thought, for so long I was writing books, and it was mainly looking at the symptoms, and there was some advice on how to move forward, but the main focus was on the symptoms of having, the fear of abandonment or toxic shame or something like that, trapped emotions. It was looking at how someone's life can be if they have got these kinds of traumas. And then as time went on, people were talking about courses and all that type of stuff, and I didn't really feel as though that was something I wanted to do, like an online course, although I have done one now, but that was obviously later on. But at the time I wasn't thinking that. And I just thought, what could I do? And I just got this idea to put together these how-to guides. And so in 2018 I wrote one on the inner child, how to heal your inner child. And then I did one on self-awareness, how to develop self-awareness.
And so these are books, because
so basically goes from how someone can, from start to finish, healing their inner child, how to develop self-awareness. The third one was purpose. So it goes in there what someone can do to find their purpose or purposes. And then I think I did a few more that year as well. And then from then, in 2019, I wrote the one on anxiety, how to deal with your anxiety. So it's just whatever inspiration, and if I think, I've got something to contribute here, then I think, right, sit down, let's get this done. And also for me, it was about how can I put something together that people can read this book and they will have the tools to slowly transform their life without needing to spend lots of money on this course or to have endless therapy. And for sure, there is a time and a place for that.
Well, we were talking the other day about rich people, psychologists or psychotherapists who may charge a great deal. Personally, having sort of gone through the system, and at one point, I know you've kind of spent a lot of money on kind of various kind of like therapists and that kind of thing. And we kind of argued whether it was, being in the UK, almost like a class thing, because obviously certain kind of working class individuals, they would not be able to kind of necessarily afford these kind of prices. And it's not to kind of like argue that kind of like people of perhaps kind of a higher kind of like earning bracket kind of don't have problems, because obviously I think there's neuroses there and kind of issues in their own way, but there's always this kind of sense of it seems to be very difficult for sort of people who perhaps don't earn a lot to kind of like get the help that's kind of needed. And we kind of said that early on in our journeys we wish that we'd had maybe kind of an amalgamation of texts or kind of books just given to us and said, read these, because you spend such a long time going down all these avenues, trying this book, this audio book. A lot of it kind of like is either kind of maybe vacuous or trash or kind of not really kind of helping. So I think the fact that you kind of did focus on writing is a really wonderful thing, because it means that, as you kind of said, it can kind of get out to the greatest kind of like hopefully a man of people. And I want to kind of emphasize, obviously, knowing you also is the fact that there's often kind of people who kind of sort of may prey on perhaps sort of like the current situation in regards to kind of like the dysfunctionality within kind of the social system, and they kind of almost maybe might offer very unuseful or misinformed information. And I want to obviously kind of state for people who may be considering buying the book is the fact that Oliver himself, there's a certain kind of like depth to his experience and his knowledge through what he's kind of personally experientially been through, what he's kind of like read, which I think when you do, and if you do choose to kind of like look into any of his kind of books, there's a depth there, which I think that the majority of people who do kind of like commit themselves to kind of writing on this subject or these subjects, the subject of kind of like healing, transformation, reintegration, however you want to call it, they're usually kind of well informed and kind of philosophize and very decent individuals, but you do get the few who kind of like may send you kind of further down the wrong path. So I kind of want to just emphasize to someone who kind of knows Oliver that the information or the assistance you're going to get, they're not just going to be coming from a scholarly, detached, kind of cerebral viewpoint. They're going to be coming from a felt, experienced individual.
No, thanks for saying
That's
that.
okay, that's all right.
Thanks for saying that.
Any other questions? So just kind of have a think. For whom would you kind of recommend this particular book at this particular time? Is there any kind of like particular person, any kind of given maybe situation which you would kind of say that this book would kind of most help, or would you say as a general kind of guide? I mean, who would you most perhaps recommend it to at this, not at this time, but obviously
whenever.
Whenever. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing about the book. I mean, it wasn't like I was being an opportunist. I thought, right, let's put something together now and I can kind of take advantage. It was obviously, put together at the end of last year. And of course, with what's going on, there's perhaps more needed now. But in general,
if people listen in the future, this is recorded at the time of the present corona crisis, just for clarification there. Carry on, sorry.
And so in general, there's obviously anxiety is a big problem for a lot of people anyway. So when it comes to the book, there is basically, I talk about two types of people when it comes to anxiety. And I say there's the first type who is basically experiences anxiety all the time. So it can be hard for them to leave their house. It's not just something they experience in social settings, for example.
Okay.
And then the other example is the type of person that generally experiences anxiety around others, and they might find it hard to socialise and to be around others. So it looks at those two, briefly looks at the two types of people.
Right, yeah.
And then after that, it just goes into what can be done. So I would say if someone does have social anxiety, or they have anxiety where they find it hard to leave their house, or to feel at peace and to just feel settled in themselves, I would say it should be suitable for both types of people.
Wonderful.
I mean, obviously everyone is different, and no one book is for everyone, no matter how good it is. But I've covered lots of bases, and as I say in the book, this isn't about doing one thing or taking this magic pill. It's about simply living in the right way. There is solutions on how to heal trauma, and looks at diet and nutrition and exercise and all those types of things, but it looks at the big picture about living in the right way, because to me it's about mental health is about living in the right way. and not
you're
simply...
not just a separate island. Kind of
No,
floating
exactly.
around, of
It's
course.
not
Yeah,
about just I do this one thing or eat this one thing, or it's all about this thing. It's about all of life, everything, environment, people we're with, what we consume mentally, physically. So I've done my best to cover all bases.
Good, wonderful.
And as I said, to me, it was about putting a guide together with all my guys that someone doesn't need to basically be a millionaire to resolve their issues. They don't need to be well connected, as they could be applicable to whoever, no matter if they're well read or if they haven't got a clue about psychology. Anyone can relate to it, because that's what it's about for me. It's about the average person.
Yeah. Wonderful. Because obviously, I mean, in regards to kind of what you kind of said, maybe sort of like backtracking a bit again, it reminded me a little bit of what R.D. Lang said in regards to, I think there was kind of a point maybe kind of like either kind of like early 60s. No, actually, sort of by that point they were kind of like coming back the other way. But in regards to kind of seeing the patient as kind of like an island or kind of like a separate entity, and I think at the moment there is a lot of emphasis, and we've talked about this, about people going to talk about mental health and very kind of almost individuating kind of like the problem without really kind of looking at the wider kind of issue. So I like the fact that you kind of your perspective is kind of very kind of wide and kind of searching, as opposed to very kind of almost I think it's what we need at the moment is kind of a holistic kind of like therapeutic kind of like model. So I think that's really important. It reminds me of, I think there was a documentary about I think American suicides and people kind of getting stuck in a psychiatric system and kind of for whatever reasons, and often they would have interviews with the parent and sit them down with the parent, and the parent would be kind of saying, we don't know what happened. 1 minute she was kind of fine, whatever, and and even just looking at these kind of parents, you could kind of almost like sense the dysfunctionality or the toxic kind of nature of the way they were talking about the deceased and that kind of thing. And it was I think often the alienation that can come when an individual feels it's all them, when often it can be sort of the fact that they are just particularly overly kind of empathetic for whatever reason, whether it's because they're more physiologically kind of like wired to having to pick up to kind of like cues from toxic family members, whatever, but often they're the ones that get kind of drugged up and kind of killed. So it's kind of good. I was going to kind of ask you, is there any kind of anyone who's your kind of writing kind of hero, or someone you find you often come back to, and you kind of if well, I am asking you now, but if I was going to ask you, because I'm asking you, who was your favourite kind of writer, or someone that you find has given you a lot of kind of grounding or comfort? Who would that be and why?
Well, I remember, I think it was about 2009 or 10, probably before I started writing articles and books, I was reading some of Osho's books.
Yeah.
And I remember reading his stuff and thinking, if I could write, I would like to write like him, because he was very direct and to the point. I just thought that's what it's about, laying things down in a very simple way so that practically anyone can understand it. So to me, it's definitely got to be Osho. Appreciate his work. As for others, I mean, I've read a few of John Bradshaw's books, R.D. Lang, Divide Itself, and Anthony Storr.
So I haven't
Integrity of Personality is a very good book. But definitely Osho in terms of appreciating his writing style. So that's the main one.
Because I mean, a lot for people who maybe sort of are caught in kind of sounds, well, me predominantly, I suppose, kind of caught in cerebral, having to kind of overcomplicate things. Being direct is perhaps something which I think you can be kind of very direct, but kind of very, very wise. I think it was makes you think of it's a weird reference, but Annie Lennox from Eurythmics kind of talks about, everyone said, well, your songs are quite simple, aren't they? They're pop music. Why do you act, so kind of like artistically geared if your lyrics? And she goes, well, they're a bit like is it haiku poems? Are they called haiku? The kind of I don't know kind of what region they come from, but it's kind of the fact that they're you can have simplicity but a lot of wisdom there. It's almost cutting off a lot of the kind of the fat around the bacon. So if there's any vegans listening. But so no, I think probably we're at a time now where there's so much kind of dissonance and kind of like information and people feeling as though they have to be kind of like overly blubbery about kind of things. So I think directness, but you can be direct but still kind of have a lot of weight, and I think your writing definitely kind of like kind of has that. Obviously, in the future, I think we have kind of talked about doing sort of maybe extending into doing kind of more podcasts. What kind of things do you think
good.
we'll be looking at? I suppose kind of because a whole myriad of different things.
I think so.
Yeah,
Looking at
yeah,
self-healing, what's going on in society, and the different challenges of trying to work through wounds when very often it's an area that is basically shunned and seen as a bit odd, or as we said before, it's just simply treating someone as if they live in isolation, so people are just given drugs or CBT, so they're not really allowed to process anything. It's just simply go on this, and again, it's you remove the goldfish dies, and then you remove the goldfish. You don't change the water. So
no,
the challenges that can be faced on the healing journey. So I think definitely looking at healing and
we've got toxic shame, probably. I think that's because
fear of abandonment as well.
Yeah, that sort of comes up because I think in a sense, I think often people maybe don't sort of like approach kind of books on abandonment because they kind of well I wasn't kind of maybe physically abandoned by a parent, but obviously I think most people who may sort of like have even started reading on this kind of subject will kind of like understand that kind of within our kind of society, which kind of would normalise and kind of make everyday this kind of behaviour. Abandonment is prolific in regards to kind of like emotional abandonment. Various kind of like different forms of abandonment, and again I can almost kind of hear people kind of saying, it's kind of like a snowflake kind of attitude, but I think it's very wise for people to kind of really be brave enough actually to accept the kind of toxic dysfunctionality within family systems and actually look towards kind of health, rather than because at the moment on soap operas and kind of generally within the media and everything, this kind of dysfunctionality is presented as the complete norm, isn't it? And kind of like rife, and I think people almost therefore become apathetic about it. Well, it's on the television, it's kind of fine. So I suppose last question, it's getting relatively dark, but for anyone who kind of wants to so either kind of like purchase the book or kind of like hear more about you, for example, where would you recommend they go? We'll obviously put a link at the end of this particular kind of audio for anybody. But is there any kind of like website or any kind of anything like that you should go on?
Well, the best place to go to would be to amazon.com or .co.uk and put in Oliver J.R. Cooper.
J.R. Cooper, right.
Or to go to my website, www.oliverjrcooper.co.uk, and the link will be there, so it's all easy to find.
Wonderful.